All right. All right. Good morning. Good morning. I know, our little jovial self. Good Friday morning. I know. Good Friday morning.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. I don't know if you recognize Henry Michaels here with his mask on.
With my mask on.
Have been vaccinated. I feel safe and comfortable here. Henry, are you comfortable with sharing any health?
Absolutely, I am. I'm fully vaccinated. So
reveal your fabulous smile.
Reveal myself, and there's
Henry Michaels, our director of Elwyn of programs here of California. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. And
glad to do it.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm just going to start off with some questions. Ready?
Okay.
All right, let's do this. How do you get into Elwyn?
So we're talking about consumers that basically want to come into Elwyn and join our program. I've been doing intakes for many years.
Okay.
And you'd think that I would know all the answers to this question by heart, but I actually have an intake is my doing like an interview. Intake is another word for an interview.
Okay.
So I can talk to clients, their caregivers, their regional center, referral sources, and ask them questions to see if we think Elwyn, California is going to be a good fit for the individual.
All right.
So we actually receive our referrals from the regional center of Orange County. So anybody that's interested in joining Elwyn as a consumer or client, as we call them, that's going to be your first rule of thumb, is to go to your regional center work and say, I want to learn more about Elwyn. Then regional center will go ahead and send me a referral packet, which I will review. And then we will go ahead and we will schedule that intake that we're talking about.
Awesome. Okay. All right. What population does Elwyn, California serve?
Well, right now it has to be anybody that has a diagnosis of somebody with a developmental disability. We also work with people that have neurological impairments, psychiatric disorders, learning impairments, and of course, people that are hearing impaired and sight impaired.
Okay. Wow. Huge range. That's wonderful. What is the starting point for an individual to enter here at Elwyn?
So once I get that referral packet from the Regional Center of Orange County, I'll go through it, I kind of review it and get an idea where I think the best fit's going to be. However, Regional Center has a group called the Adult Resource Group. They meet and talk about the consumer's needs and what type of program that they want. So here at Elwyn, in our Fountain Valley-based facility, we have 4 different programs. We have our Adult Day Service Program, Adult Day Program Special Needs, and Community Integration Program. Those that want a job in the community would join our Supported Employment Programs, which we have individual placement, and those that maybe need 100% supervision. That's called our Employment First Program. So about 6 different programs that you would have to choose from.
Elwyn has so much to offer. That's wonderful.
So many different things to choose from.
And you can grow and move around. I mean.
Oh, sure. We have people that move around from one program to another. Sometimes we'll go ahead and we'll do the intake, and a parent or a client will choose and say, gee, that program's not for me. You know, what else do you have? Or I might make the recommendation that we think that this program over here might be a better fit for you. Absolutely. And then, of course, it goes back to the regional center, and they'll have to get another referral from the Adult Resource Group for the new program. But right now, we're looking at people that are under the age of 25.
Oh, under.
Well, the reason I say that is because if you're coming to a program like Elwyn that does pay paid work, we still have our sub-minimum wage certificate. I'm not going to go into great detail about what WIOA is, but you might want to Google it yourself and find out more about what's called the Work Innovation Opportunity Act. Basically, and I think it was 2016, there was a new law that was passed stating that those leaving school that wish to get a job should be able to get a job in the community at minimum wage or above. But maybe you're not ready. Maybe you're choosing not to get a job at minimum wage or above, and you would like to come to a program like ours where you can make the sub-minimum wage. Therefore, there's a lot of hoops that you're being asked to jump through now. Like go to the Department of Rehab. They have to evaluate you, find out why they think you're not ready to get a job in the community and why you might benefit from a program like Elwyn that pays the sub-minimum wage. That's it in a nutshell. There's more details and things that you would need. But do keep that in mind for those individuals that are under 25.
So do your research and then maybe email you or connect with you after some research.
Yeah, I could certainly speak to
Wonderful.
that, and so could the Department of Rehab.
In the regional
But for those individuals over 25, all of these programs are open, and we have no age limit. I think we've had people working in their 80s here. I think now we have one lady she's 82 now, so
Absolutely.
people can stay as long as they want. And some people might choose.
Well, that's promising for me.
Some people might choose to leave a work program and say, oh, I'm going to retire, and then go to like our day program where you're doing mostly activities because you don't want to work anymore.
Absolutely.
So there's a little something for everybody.
Fantastic. And does that fall into the criteria of entering Elwyn programs?
Yeah, it really does. It really
So the
does.
criteria for the same for facility-based programs and support employment.
Well,
Explain to me that.
Those that want a job in the community have to have the desire to
So outside of
gainfully
Elwyn.
employed. Yes, some people refer to
Okay.
that as your outside job, or what we're calling now a community-based employment or competitive integrated employment, CEI. CIE.
Elwyn has so
CIE,
much to offer you guys. Listen up. Here we go.
So we've been very successful in placing people into jobs in the community. We have people working at grocery stores, retail stores, veterinary places like the Home Depot, hardware stores.
The rescue centers, national something.
And I'm glad you brought that up,
Oh.
because not only do we have the individual placements, but we do have clients working in what are called the group placements.
Oh.
And what's interesting is those people who are in the individual placements, right away you start off at about 100% job coaching, and then there's a slow reduction to where you just might be getting 75% coaching, then 50. The goal is to have our clients in individual placements working with 20% coaching.
Wow.
However, there may be those individuals that feel they need that ongoing coaching at 100%. Those individuals would be more suitable for what's called a group placement. And so we have groups of 3 people with the supervisor that's with them all the time, and they're able to get that ongoing job coaching on a daily basis. Right now, we have clients in groups at the Joint Forces Training Base in Los Alamitos. We have 4 groups of 3 out there right now. They do custodial work, a lot of office cleaning, and they do some stripping and waxing the floors, vacuuming.
It's a big responsibility.
It really is.
What about getting there? What if they don't drive? How do you get there?
So
I want a job. How do you get there?
Sure. So those people in the community, they can take Access, or they can take the city bus, which is called the fixed route at OCTA, or they're able to have somebody drive them or drive themselves. Most of the people that come here for our site-based programs here in Fountain Valley will go ahead and take Access.
Okay.
So I would say about 85% of our people are on Access.
Okay, that's something to get through. And that's another referral through Regional Center.
Regional Center will
Okay.
help you with that. They will go ahead and do what's called a TSR, a Transportation Service Request. I just requested 4 of them in there because we're going to be doing our reopening on June the 1st for one of our programs.
So Regional Center and Elwyn, they seem to be really strong advocates.
Oh, absolutely.
Wonderful, it's a must.
And for those individuals that want to come to our program, they're requesting at least 2 weeks notice, because this has to be approved once again by that adult resource group.
Oh, wow, okay.
So if we're doing June 1st, I had to get on the computer right now and make my request for those first 4 individuals that are going to be coming back.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
All right, people, get in line. There's 4 ahead of you. 4 ahead of you.
Gotta watch our dates and calendars and times.
Okay. What happens next? Okay, 4 ahead of you. What happens next? You're able to schedule an intake during this pandemic? How does that work?
So the intake prior to the pandemic, we were able to do those in person. I would go ahead and schedule a time for the client and caregiver or their parent just to come in here to the facility, and we would do the full tour, show them all the different programs. And we would sit down and actually talk about what it takes to get into Elwyn at that sit down in-person intake. Right now, due to the pandemic, everything's done virtually. So whenever we go ahead and schedule an intake, we'll go ahead and send you an invite to your email. And right now we're using Microsoft Teams, and we can engage and do the whole thing virtually. I can meet the client and the parents, caregiver, on the computer, and just go through and do it that way. And the service coordinators are welcome to join us as well. Hopefully, if we continue to get on track and get this pandemic behind us, we'll be able to go back to the in-person intakes. So
which is
we're hoping. We're hearing good things, right now on the
Yeah.
news, but there's still work to be done.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then again, you guys are going to meet the staff. Check our YouTube out. Get online virtually. See our channel, because you'll get to see our staff and their talents and what we have to offer. Be a part of us. This Elwyn team is
I second
fantastic.
that. I watched
Yeah.
the live streaming, which is
Live streaming,
happening
sorry.
right now, but you can go ahead and view it later on. So I'll go ahead and watch that in the evening and see what I missed, because I'm doing different things from 11 to 12.
For sure.
And it's just so exciting. Everybody's had so much to offer, and I'm just so proud of everybody.
Yeah, we are definitely, we're a shy bunch, but we are coming alive. We like it. Okay, so generally, how long does it take? I'm reading some of these questions with my cheat sheet, guys. I've been busy to get into Elwyn. Once you're accepted, that's such a ucky word, but once we've both agreed that we're a fabulous match.
Exactly.
How does that work? How long?
So allow at least 2 weeks, but we're very flexible.
Okay.
There's a lot of paperwork that needs to be put in place before we can start.
Yeah.
So for those people that are coming to a work program, we need to have a physical, a TB test. These are all requirements. A California ID card. And let's make sure that it's not expired. I've had people come in and say, here's my ID card. And then we'll look, oh, it's expired. Got to go to the DMV.
Okay, now that's different than a driver's license, right? An ID card.
We'll take an ID or a driver's license.
Perfect.
Either or. But it's got to be current. And then very important too, Social Security card. I've had many people say, oh, I can't find it or I lost it. So make your appointment with your Social Security Administration and go down there and get another one. We can accept the card that you've been down there, and you might already have a number, so we can go ahead and accept the number with the card stating that you've been down there and you're just waiting for the card to come in. But once again, this is a program where you're being paid, so these are documents that we have to have: Social Security number and the actual ID. Our corporate office needs to go ahead and get you into the system to issue you a paycheck.
Okay.
And yes, you are issued a paycheck every other week, every other Friday. People get a paycheck.
Today's payday. See the smile?
It is. And we offer direct deposit.
Okay.
If you choose not to get direct deposit, you get a paper check. So.
Yeah, and all those are fantastic.
One other thing I think is important.
Yeah, some criteria. You want to go through a few of those?
Well, pretty much that's the criteria, but everybody's going to need to know when we do reopen for in-person services, everyone's going to need to complete what's called a risk assessment.
Okay.
So we have an administrator, case manager, and Carrie, of course, helps with that. It's about a 6-page form, and we need to make sure that when we do reopen that you're going to be safe and everyone's going to be safe. So there's criteria that needs to be met to make sure that we're following COVID-19 guidelines and as far as safety when we do reopen. And the big things, and I know the ladies are doing this on all of their classes, making sure that you're all learning about how to wash your hands properly, often, frequently, and doing so for at least 20 seconds. Or singing happy birthday. I saw somebody doing that. Happy birthday.
And we do row your boat. Because I'm over
and I saw you doing row your boat.
Yeah.
Another big one is wearing your mask. So making sure that you're wearing your mask and
even if I
make sure your mask is covering both your nose and your mouth. We can't have this and we can't have this. So everything's gotta be covered. And when you do come to Elwyn, we have our reopening plan that's already in place, and maybe we'll go into that in a separate meeting.
Not a problem. But, absolutely. Yeah. Keep us informed.
There's going to be more criteria. Whenever people do come back to Elwyn, I will send you what's called a letter of acknowledgement, which will talk about some of the changes and the differences in the rules from when we were open before the pandemic to what it's going to be like now. It's going to be different. It's going to be different.
Yeah. But for us that are enrolled new, we'll just follow right along. Because it won't be.
And the other concept is the social distancing. Yeah. So make sure you're all practicing your social distancing. And if you're not familiar with that term, which I think after a year of hearing it, everybody knows it's 6 feet. 6 feet apart.
I don't like
it. 6 feet apart.
How are we going to welcome each other? Are we just going to do an air high five? Can we elbow? We can't fist anymore.
We are.
We have to come to.
We can wave and we can maybe bow. This and that. Just keep watching.
I'm going to keep my mask on, even if they tell us not to, because my frowning. Wonderful.
Well, we will talk about the mask wearing for sure. Like I say, look and see that letter of acknowledgement that I'm going to be sending for those people that are going to be coming back. And
good.
Remember that all the changes, it's just all about safety, your safety and ours and the communities. So.
Absolutely. And then it's just, and to get the paycheck and to enjoy everybody back. And we'll still be doing, I think we should still be doing our virtual classes. I think it'd be fun to have Elwyn clients come back and interview them and watch them work. And I don't know, let's just see how it goes. But fun stuff.
I think that's where it's going to come into the whole person-centered planning, and it's going to see what the individual that's enrolled in our program wants to do. Do they want to just do paid work? Do they want to stay home and do alternative services? Do they want to do a hybrid model? And then we'll have to do that negotiating with regional center to see if they're willing to go along with that. So before you do come back, I'm sure there'll be lots of negotiating behind the scenes, and once again making sure that we're meeting your person-centered plan and your needs.
Yeah, I see you on a lot of meetings and very busy, so that tells me you are thinking of clients and staff and all of us. And Henry, I appreciate you doing that, so thank you for taking the time. And you guys don't miss out. We're going to grab Jillian next week. Jillian is our new fabulous case manager here. And don't miss out. So
don't miss out.
Tune in. We have a lot of staff and volunteers and plenty to come. So tune in, please.
Okay. Any other questions for me? Otherwise, I think I pretty much covered what I want everybody to know about how to get into Elwyn. But I will end on one other note. We're not just hiring for clients. We need staff as well. When we do reopen, please go to our website and go to Elwyn Careers. Right now we're hiring for job coaches in the community. And I think there's a new posting going up next week for program instructors here in the Fountain Valley facility. So
wonderful.
If you know somebody looking for a job that thinks they might be a good fit for Elwyn or vice versa, check us out and fill out an application.
I'm going to make sure my job's not listed.
She's not going anywhere. We wouldn't let her.
Okay, you guys. But seriously, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. Tune in. Thank you. Oh, mask up. Here we go.
Alrighty.
And remember, fashion and safety.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Homework of kids. All right, you guys. Good job, you guys.
So you're going to be reading?
Thanks, Stuart.
Awesome.
Grace, stand on in here. You're going to read over there? I know.
Go, Grace.
Hey, guys, little tidbit. Just want to, I know, right? We're so happy it's Friday and it's payday. You know, it acts like we got a race, but, you know, we're just so well appreciated and all that good stuff. And the vending machine was stopped this morning. And there's chocolate, just note to self. Just saying. The gentleman is amazing. Grace, I just have to tell you, the library's back open. So
awesome.
I was informed by.
But I bought this for nothing.
I was informed by my mother-in-law that the library is open, and I've been telling her. I know. I've been asking you. So, anyways, I'll make sure that I go. So write down your wish list, and we'll go from there. But please enjoy and. Thank you, everyone. Just wanted to let you know, Huntington Beach Library up and running. Check the hours.
And I'm actually going to get a little closer, as I often do, because this is not a picture book. But it has some little drawings that I think you'll really appreciate. So I want to be able to hold them up so that you can maybe see them. So I am going to read this book, Stuart Little, which was a famous book when I was little, and I really loved it. And you guys probably saw the movie, but the movie probably shows you everything. And when you read a book, you get to imagine it the way you want to see it. So I think that's really better. And I actually bought 3 of these books by E.B. White to read to you. Another one is a very favorite story, Charlotte's Web, and The Trumpet of the Swan is the third book. So I'm going to try to make my way through those for you guys. So I won't be able to read the whole book today. So you're going to have to make sure and check your live stream feed and read it for the next part of the book. But we're going to get started today. And something I only found out last night when I got the books. We have all, or maybe you have heard of E.B. White. I knew that that person had written Charlotte's Web, but I didn't know they wrote Stuart Little. And in the introduction to this book, someone pointed out that E.B. White, that the author's full name is Elwyn Brooks White. I never heard of anyone with the name Elwyn before I came here, and now I know two. So I'm very excited. I think it's very, I think it's very prophetic that we get to read Elwyn's books. So I'm going to start with Stuart Little, and if you get a book at the library or at the store, on the back, there's usually a little description to make you want to read the book. Because here's a book, what's it about? I don't know. So if you're interested in a book, either you can read this or ask someone to help you out with this little explanation of the book. And this one says, he's one small mouse with one very big adventure. And it says that Stuart Little is no ordinary mouse. He is born to a family of humans. He lives in New York City with his parents, his older brother George, and Snowbell the cat. Though he's shy and thoughtful, he's also a true lover of adventure. Stuart's greatest adventure comes when his best friend, a beautiful little bird named Margalo, disappears from her nest. Determined to track her down, Stuart ventures away from home for the very first time in his life. He finds adventure aplenty. But will he find his friend? So that's supposed to make you want to read the book, and it did for me. So let's get started with Stuart Little, Chapter 1, In the Drain. When Mrs. Frederick C. Little's second son arrived, everybody noticed that he was not much bigger than a mouse. Truth of the matter was, the baby looked very much like a mouse in every way. He was only 2 inches high, and he had a mouse's sharp nose. Oh, I'm sorry, I should show you. Here he is, Stuart Little. And he had a mouse's sharp nose and an inability to turn pages effectively. Oh, that's me. A mouse's tail, a mouse's whiskers, and the pleasant, shy manner of a mouse. Before he was many days old, he was not only looking like a mouse, but acting like one too. Wearing a gray, I don't know any mice that act this way, wearing a gray hat and carrying a small cane. Mr. and Mrs. Little named him Stuart, and Mr. Little made him a tiny bed out of 4 clothespins and a cigarette box. So they show him in his little bed here. It's made from clothespins on the corners. Isn't that cute? Unlike most babies, Stuart could walk as soon as he was born. When he was a week old, he could climb lamps by shimmying up their cords. Mrs. Little saw right away that the infant clothes she had provided were unsuitable, and she set out to work and made him a fine little blue worsted suit with patch pockets in which he could keep his handkerchief, his money, and his keys. Every morning before Stuart dressed, Mrs. Little went to his room and weighed him on a small scale, which was really meant for weighing letters because he's very small. At birth, Stuart could have been sent by first-class mail for 3 cents, or 50 nowadays, but his parents preferred to keep him rather than send him away in the mail. And when, at the age of 1 month, he had gained only 1/3 of an ounce, his mother was so worried that she sent for the doctor. This is very small. The doctor was delighted with Stuart and said it was very unusual for an American family to have a mouse. He took Stuart's temperature and found that it was 98.6, which is normal for a mouse. He also examined Stuart's chest and heart and looked into his ears solemnly with a flashlight. Not every doctor can look into a mouse's ear without laughing. So he was doing a good job. Everything seemed to be all right, and Mrs. Little was pleased to get such a good report. Now here is the doctor examining Stuart. See, right there. I don't know if you can see it very well, but I'm trying. The doctor said, feed him up as he left. The home of the Little family was a pleasant place near a park in New York City. In the mornings, the sun streamed in through the east windows, and all the Littles were up early as a general rule. Stuart was a great help to his parents and to his older brother George because of his small size. He could do things that a mouse could do and was agreeable about doing them. One day, when Mrs. Little was washing out the bathtub after Mr. Little had taken a bath, she lost a ring off her finger. Oh boy, have you ever had that happen? And she was horrified to discover that it had fallen down the drain. What had I better do? She cried, trying to keep back the tears. If I were you, said George, the older brother, I should bend a hairpin in the shape of a fish hook and tie it onto a piece of string and try to fish out the ring with it. So Mrs. Stuart found a little piece of string and a hairpin and was for about a half an hour fishing for the ring, but it was dark down in the drain and the hook always seemed to catch on something else before she could get it down to where the ring was. What luck? Inquired Mr. Little, coming into the bathroom. No luck at all, said Mrs. Little. The ring is so far down I can't fish it up. Well, why don't we send Stuart down after it? Suggested Mr. Little. How about it, Stuart? Would you like to try? Yes, I would, Stuart replied, but I think I'd better get into my old pants. I imagine it's wet down there. So here they are, fishing him down into the drain on a little hook there. So it is all of that, meaning the wetness, said George, who was a trifle annoyed that his hook idea did not work. So Stuart slipped into his old pants and prepared to go down the drain after the ring. He decided to carry the string along with him, leaving one end in charge of his father. When I jerk 3 times on the string, pull me up, he said. And while Mr. Little knelt in the tub, Stuart slid easily down the drain and was lost from view. In a minute or so, there came 3 quick jerks on the string, and Mr. Little carefully hauled it up. There at the end was Stuart with the ring safely around his neck. Oh, my brave little son, said Mrs. Little proudly as she kissed Stuart and thanked him. How was it down there? Asked Mr. Little, who was always curious to know about places he had never been to. It was all right, said Stuart, but the truth was the drain had made him very slimy, and it was necessary for him to take a bath and to sprinkle himself with a bit of his mother's violet water, which is a kind of a perfumey thing, before he felt like he was himself again. Everybody in the family thought that he had been awfully good about the whole thing. And here he is getting sprinkled with his little violet water. Ooh, I was still stinky after the drain. So now we're on to chapter 2, home problems. Stuart was also helpful when it came to ping pong. The Littles liked playing ping pong, but the balls had a way of rolling under chairs, sofas, radiators, and this meant that the players were forever stooping down and reaching under things. Stuart soon learned to chase the balls, and it was a great sight to see him come out from under a hot radiator pushing a ping pong ball with all his might, the perspiration rolling down his cheeks. The ball, of course, was almost as high as he was, and he had to throw his whole weight against it in order to keep it rolling. Now see, here's a picture of him in comparison to the ball that he's helping them get out. So that's a big chore for such a little guy. It's awfully nice of him, I think. The Littles had a grand piano in their living room, which was all right, except that one of the keys was a sticky key and didn't work properly. Mrs. Little said she thought it must be the damp weather, but I don't see how it could be the damp weather, for the key had been sticking for about 4 years, during which time there had been many bright, clear days, dry as a bone. But anyway, the key stuck, and it was a great inconvenience for anyone trying to play the piano. Ding, 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 ding. So let's see, it bothered George particularly when he was playing scarf dance, which I do not know what it is, but I can understand, which was rather lively. You can imagine he's playing along and then no sound, ding, 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 no sound. So it was George who had the idea of stationing Stuart inside the piano. And Stuart would push the key up the second it was played. This was no easy job for Stuart because he had to crouch down between the felt hammers so that he wouldn't get hit on the head. That's inside the piano. And here he is. And these are the little felt hammers that he has to get in. They're as big as he are. And you can imagine if he is in the wrong place, he might get squooshed. So he crouched down between the felt hammers so that he wouldn't get hit on the head. But Stuart liked it just the same because it was exciting inside the piano, dodging about, and the noise was quite terrific in there. Sometimes after a long session, he would emerge quite deaf. He'd been in there too long and it was loud, as though he had just stepped out of an airplane after a long journey. And it would be some little time before he really felt normal again. So I guess this picture is him feeling a little strange from listening to the loud sounds of the piano. But that's okay. He still liked it. So I think it was very nice of him. I'm sure they really appreciated the help. Mr. and Mrs. Little often discussed Stuart quietly between themselves when he wasn't around. But they had never quite recovered from the shock of the surprise of having a mouse in the family. He was so very tiny and he presented so many problems to his parents. Mr. Little said that, for one thing, there must be no references to mice in their conversation. He made Mrs. Little tear from the nursery songbook the page about the 3 blind mice. See how they run. I don't want Stuart to get a lot of notions in his head, said Mr. Little. I should feel badly to have my son growing up fearing a farmer's wife was going to cut off his tail with a carving knife. It is such things that make children dream bad dreams when they go to bed at night. Oh, already? Nope, there's another page. I think it's stuck again. There we go. Yes, replied Mrs. Little, and I think we had better start thinking about the poem, "'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse." I think it might embarrass Stuart to hear mice mentioned in such a belittling manner. That's right, said her husband. But what shall we say when we come to that line in the poem? We'll have to say something. We can't just say it was the night before Christmas when all through the house not a creature was stirring. Bink. That doesn't sound complete. It needs a word to rhyme with house. Well, what about louse? Asked Mrs. Little. Or grouse? Said Mr. Little. I suggest souse, remarked George, who had been listening to the conversation from across the room. Now, a souse, I believe, is someone who is drunk, as in those times. It was decided that louse was the best substitute for mouse. And so when Christmas came around, Mr. and Mrs. Little carefully rubbed out the word mouse from the poem and wrote in the word louse. I think louse is a kind of like a bad thing, like a germ or, like a bug that you might get. I'm trying to think of something like, have you ever had lice? Hopefully not. But it is not a mouse, and that was the point. So they always read through the poem, and it went this way. "'Twas the night before Christmas when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a louse." And they solved that problem. But the thing that worried Mr. Little most was the mouse hole in the pantry. Ooh, there's a mouse hole. Have you ever seen a mouse hole? It does kind of look like that. It's not like in the cartoons where there's always this nice little arch thing. It's just a hole that some mouse chewed in there. And you don't want that in your house, I'll tell you. So let's see. This hole had been made by some mouse in the days before the Littles came to live in the house. And nothing had been done about stopping it up. Mr. Little was not at all sure that he understood Stuart's real feelings about a mouse hole. He didn't know where the hole led to, and it made him uneasy to think that someday Stuart might feel the desire to venture into it. After all, he does look a good deal like a mouse, said Mr. Little to his wife, and I've never seen a mouse yet that didn't like to go into a hole. Why not? But that's the end of that chapter. And now the next chapter 3 is called Washing Up. And here is Stuart and his older brother George doing some morning exercises to get the blood flowing, always a good idea. Stuart was an early riser. He was almost always the first person up in the morning. He liked the feeling of being the first one stirring. He enjoyed the quiet rooms with the books standing still on the shelves, the pale light coming in through the windows, and the fresh smell of day. In wintertime, it would be quite dark when he climbed from his bed made out of the cigarette box, and he sometimes shivered with cold as he stood in his nightgown doing his exercises. Stuart touched his toes 10 times every morning to keep himself in good condition. He had seen his brother George do it, and George had explained that it kept the stomach muscles firm and was a fine abdominal thing to do. So after exercising, Stuart would slip on his handsome wool wrapper, tie the cord tightly, so that's like his robe, tie the cord tightly around his waist and head for the bathroom, creeping silently through the long, dark hall past his mother and father's room, past the hall closet where the carpet sweeper was kept, past George's room, and all along by the head of the stairs until he got to the bathroom. Of course, the bathroom would be dark too, so Stuart's father had thoughtfully tied a long string onto the pull chain of the light. So now, back in those days, you had a little string to pull to turn the light on. He made the string go almost down to the floor just for Stuart. So the string reached clear to the floor, and by grasping it up as high as he could and throwing his whole weight on it, Stuart was able to turn on the light. What a morning. That's a workout. Swinging on the string this way with his long robe trailing around his ankles, he looked like a little old friar pulling the bell rope in an abbey. Well, they're saying he looked like a friar is someone that's like a monk or somebody that wears the long dark robes. And so they're saying he looked like one of those guys ringing the bells in the morning. So to get to the wash basin, Stuart had to climb a tiny rope ladder, which his father had fixed for him. He set up all sorts of nice stuff. George has promised to build Stuart a small special wash basin, only 1 inch high, and with a little rubber tube through which the water would flow. But George was always saying that he was going to build something and then forgetting about it. Does that happen with your family too? Stuart just went ahead and climbed the rope ladder up to the family wash basin every morning to wash his face and hands and brush his teeth. Mrs. Little had provided him with a doll-sized toothbrush, a doll-sized cake of soap, and a doll-sized washcloth and a doll's comb, which he used for combing his whiskers. He carried those things in his bathrobe pocket, and when he reached the top of the ladder, he took them out, laid them neatly in a row, and set about the task of turning the water on. That might be a challenge. For such a small fellow, turning the water on was quite a problem. He had discussed it with his father one day after making several unsuccessful attempts. "I can get up to the faucet all right," he exclaimed, "but I can't seem to turn it on because I have nothing to brace my feet against." "Yes, I know," his father replied. "That's the whole trouble." George, who always listened to conversations whenever he could, that's his older brother, said that in his opinion, they might ought to construct a brace for Stuart. And with that, he got out some boards, a saw, a hammer, a screwdriver, a brad awl, that is something that makes a hole in something, and some nails, and started to make a terrific fuss in the bathroom. He was decided that he was going to build a brace for Stuart, but he soon became interested in something else and disappeared, leaving the tools laying around all over the bathroom floor. Been there, done that. Stuart, after examining this mess, turned to his father again. "Maybe I could pound the faucet with something and turn it that way," he said. So Stuart's father provided him with a very small, light hammer made of wood. And Stuart found that by swinging it 3 times around his head and letting it come down with a crash against the handle of the faucet, he could start a thin stream of water flowing, enough to brush his teeth in anyway and moisten his washcloth. So here he is with this little hammer pounding on the handle to get it to turn a little bit. He probably doesn't really need a lot of water, does he? So, let's see. Every morning after climbing to the basin, he would seize the hammer and pound the faucet, and the other members of the household, dozing in their beds, would hear the bright, sharp plink, plink, plink of Stuart's hammer like a faraway blacksmith, telling them that day had come and that Stuart was trying to brush his teeth. Chapter 4, Exercise. Oh, I thought we already saw that. One fine morning in the month of May, hello, it's May, when Stuart was 3 years old, he arose early, as it was his custom, washed and dressed himself, took his hat and cane, and went downstairs to the living room to see what was doing. Nobody was around but Snowbell, the white cat belonging to Mrs. Little. Snowbell was another early riser, and this morning he was lying on the rug in the middle of the room, thinking about the days when he was just a kitten. "Good morning," said Stuart. "Hello," replied Snowbell sharply. "You're up early, aren't you?" Stuart looked at his watch. "Yes," he said. "It's only 5 minutes past 6, but I felt good, and I thought I'd come down and get a little exercise." "Well, I should think you'd get all this exercise you'd want up there in the bathroom, banging around, waking up the rest of us, trying to get your water started, just so you can brush your teeth. Your teeth aren't really big enough to brush anyway. You want to see a good set? Look at mine." And Snowbell showed him teeth, big teeth, big in comparison to Stuart's, of course. He said he had 2 rows of gleaming white teeth, sharp as needles. "Very nice," said Stuart, "but mine are all right too, even though they're small. As for exercise, I take all I can get. I bet my stomach muscles are firmer than yours are." "I bet they're not," said the cat. "I bet they are," said Stuart. "They're like iron bands." "I bet they're not," said the cat. Stuart glanced around the room to see what he could do to prove to Snowball that what good stomach muscles he had. He spied the drawn window shade on the east window with its shade cord and ring like a trapeze, and it gave him an idea. So we used to have shades to pull down on the windows to keep the bright sun out, and they'd have a little string with a ring at the end of them that we'd use to put our finger in to put them up or down. So that's what he spied. And that gave him an idea. He climbed to the windowsill and he took his hat off and laid down his cane. "You can't do this," he said. "I'm sorry, you can't do this," he said to the cat. And he ran up and jumped onto the ring the way acrobats do in the circus, meaning to pull himself up. But a surprising thing happened. Stuart had taken such a hard jump that it startled the shade. With a loud snap, the shade flew up clear to the top of the window, dragging Stuart along. Whee! See, he's flying away. Uh-oh. I don't think this is a good thing. So, the shade flew to the top, and he got rolled up inside of the shade now. And he couldn't even budge. No. "Holy mackerel," said Snowbell, who almost was as surprised as Stuart. "I guess that will teach him to show off his muscles." "Help! Let me out!" cried Stuart, who was frightened and bruised inside the rolled up shade. He could hardly breathe in there, but his voice was so weak that nobody heard. Snowbell just chuckled. He wasn't that fond of Stuart, and it didn't bother him at all that Stuart was wrapped up in a window shade, crying and hurt and unable to get out. Instead of running upstairs and telling Mr. and Mrs. Little about this accident, Snowbell did a very curious thing. He glanced around to see if anybody was looking. Then he leapt softly up to the windowsill, picked up Stuart's hat and cane in his mouth, and carried them to the pantry and laid them down outside the entrance to the mouse hole. See, here he's got the little cane he put down by the mouse hole. and he's got Stuart Little's hat in his mouth, and he's putting them down outside the mouse hole. Why would he do that? When Mrs. Little came down later and found them there, she gave a shrill scream, which brought everybody on the run. Ah! It's happened! She cried. What has? Asked her husband. Stuart's down the mouse hole. Oh my gosh. That takes us to another whole chapter, which I'm glad to see is chapter 5 called Rescued. That sounds good, right? George was in favor of ripping up the pantry floor. He ran and got his hammer and then his screwdriver and an ice pick. I'll have this old floor up in double quick time, he said, inserting his screwdriver under the edge of the first board and giving a good vigorous pry. We will not rip up the floor till we have had a good search, announced Mrs. Little. That's final, George. You can put that hammer away where you got it. All right, said George. I see that nobody in this house cares anything about Stuart but me. Mrs. Little began to cry. My poor dear little son, she said. I know he'll get wedged somewhere. And just because you can't travel comfortably in a mouse hole doesn't mean that it isn't a perfectly suitable place for Stuart, said Mr. Little. Just don't get yourself all worked up. Well, maybe we ought to lower some food to him, suggested George. That's what the state police did when a man got stuck in a cave. George started into the kitchen and came running back with a dish of applesauce. We can pour some of this in, and it will run down to where he is. George spooned out a little bit of the applesauce and started to poke it into the hole. Oh, stop that, bellowed Mr. Little. George, will you kindly let me handle this situation? Put that applesauce away immediately. Mr. Little glared fiercely at George. I was just trying to help my brother, said George, shaking his head as he carried the sauce back to the kitchen. Well, let's all call to Stuart, suggested Mrs. Little. It's quite possible that the mouse hole branches and twists about and that he has lost his way. Well, very well, said Mr. Little. I will count 3, then we will all call, and then we will all keep perfectly quiet for 3 seconds listening for the answer. He took out his watch. Mr. and Mrs. Little and George got down on their hands and knees and put their mouths as close to the mouse hole as they could, and they all called, Stuart! And then they all kept perfectly still for 3 seconds. So here they are outside the mouse hole, getting as close as they can, calling for Stuart. Stuart, from his cramped position inside the rolled-up shade, nowhere near there, heard them yelling in the pantry and called back, Here I am. But he had such a weak voice, and he was so far inside the shade that the other members of the family did not hear his answering cry. Again, said Mr. Little. 1, 2, 3, Stuart! It was no use. No answer was heard. Mrs. Little went up to her bedroom to lay down and sobbed. Mr. Little went to the telephone and called up the Bureau of Missing Persons. But when a man asked for a description of Stuart and told that he was only 2 inches high, he hung up in disgust. George, meantime, went down the cellar and hunted around to see if he could find another entrance to the mouse hole. Well, that was clever. He moved a great many trunks and suitcases, flower pots, baskets, boxes, and broken chairs from one end of the cellar to the other in order to get to the section of wall which he thought was the likeliest, but he found no hole. He did, however, come across an old discarded rowing machine of Mr. Little's and becoming interested in this, carried it upstairs with some difficulty and spent the rest of the morning rowing. It's a rowing machine. Those are cool. Those are still valid as an exercise. When lunchtime came, everybody had forgotten about breakfast that day. All 3 of them sat down to a lamb stew which Mrs. Little had prepared, but it was a sad meal. Each one trying not to stare at the small empty chair which Stuart always occupied, right next to Mrs. Little's glass of water. No one could eat, so great was the sorrow. George ate a bit of dessert, of course, but nothing else. When lunch was over, Mrs. Little broke out crying again, and she thought Stuart must be dead. Oh, nonsense, nonsense, growled Mr. Little. If he is dead, said George, we ought to pull down the shades throughout all the house. And he raced to the windows and began pulling down all the shades. George, shouted Mr. Little in an exasperated tone, if you don't stop acting like an idiot, I will have to punish you. We're having enough trouble today without having to cope with your foolishness. But George had already run into the living room and begun to darken it to show his respect for the dead. He pulled a cord and out dropped Stuart onto the windowsill. Well, for the love of Pete, said George. Look who's here, Mom. It's about time somebody pulled down that shade, remarked Stuart. That's all I can say. He was quite weak and hungry at that time. Mrs. Little was so overjoyed to see him that she kept right on crying. I'm so happy to see you. Of course, everybody wanted to know what had happened. It was simply an accident that might happen to anybody, said Stuart. As for my hat and cane being found at the entrance to the mouse hole, you can draw your own conclusions. Well, I don't know about you, but that's a kind of an ending place I think that we could go by. And thankfully, Stuart was found safe, and I'm sure that they gave him some nice lamb stew that was left over from lunch, since none of them could eat it. And he's probably feeling better now. So we'll go on next time with Chapter 6, A Fair Breeze, and we'll learn a little bit more about Stuart Little's adventures, because he's already just had one very big one in that window shade, hasn't he? Can you imagine the window shade rolling up? And have you ever seen people, like, they'll take a person and roll them up in a rug? Well, that's what he was up there, trapped in the window shade, and he could have been there for the rest of his life if they hadn't decided to pull that cord down and he flopped out. So Snowbell did not win this day, if that was their goal, to make them forget about Stuart, because he's very beloved by their family. He is a member of their family. And a lot of us have pets that are members of our family that we would want to make sure we're okay. So Stuart got saved, and otherwise the book would be exactly this long, right? We'd be done. So next time I'll read you some more about him going outside. It looks like he's going out into the apartment and into the world. So thank you for listening today about Stuart Little. I hope you're interested in Stuart Little and want to hear some more, because next time I will read some more to you. Well, thank you again. I'm Grace at the wonderful Elwyn, and I hope you had a great time with Henry too. Thanks, guys. Aww.
Thank you,
Thank you, Grace. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Cool
Great
music.
job.
Say about that. Cool music, huh? That's Marsha's son.
It is. We thank him too. Alex.
Yeah.
Thanks for the second word.
Yeah.